sit down, shut up, listen to what's going on in your head, because that's where it's all at. All this out here is a mirage. This is a virtual reality. If it were a reality, it wouldn't change, and everything here goes.
There's thousands of them every single day on your planet. Look what's coming out of the back of it in color. 5 separate gases coming out of this reptilian tanker, dropping 5 gases at 300 feet. You're smoking their gas today because they drop this gas only on technically advancing communities on the planet. Okay? Every 4 to 6 weeks. So you could be getting it today. Not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're flying all over us. So the reason you don't see these, because they're dropping the gas. And so we are being mind controlled, not for the last couple of weeks, but for thousands of years. And that, back to the Romans again, their minds were controlled. I know this sounds insane, but this is fact. This is what it is.
Tonight, 2 newly released pieces of alleged U.S. military footage are sparking a lot of fresh questions about unidentified objects in the sky. So the videos were said to be obtained from military archives and released to the public by investigative journalists Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. They say both recordings show government-filmed objects that were officially designated as UAPs, unidentified anomalous phenomena, and they weren't meant to be seen by the public. Now, both videos were recorded by MQ-9 Reaper drones, and both show objects making movements that Corbell says defy basic physics. The first video dates back to August of 2012. It's recorded over the Persian Gulf using infrared sensors. It shows 3 objects moving in what appears to be a triangular formation, and at one point, one of the objects falls back, and it suddenly accelerates forward again, kind of like in a slingshot motion to rejoin the other 2. Weird. The second video, more recent, 2021, recorded during a U.S. drone mission over southern Syria. And in this footage, you have a single object that's tracked by a weapons-grade targeting system. Now, it moves steadily at first, then suddenly changes direction, accelerates out of frame at what analysts describe as extreme speed. There's no visible propulsion. NewsNation has not independently verified the authenticity of these videos. The Pentagon has not confirmed them or even commented. But what are we actually seeing in these videos? Nick Pope's here, investigated UAPs for the UK Ministry of Defense. Nick, good to see you. These the real deal?
Yes, I think so. Jeremy and George, the journalists concerned, have a proven track record of getting authentic Pentagon footage into the public domain. And when you see these sorts of things just move in a straight line at a constant speed, sure, you can say balloons, birds, but as you said in your intro, the Pentagon itself put this into the UAP category, unidentified anomalous phenomena, and that's what we're looking at.
Okay, let me ask you the million-dollar question. Is this a piece of technology, advanced technology? I mean, we're talking about 2012, we're talking about 2021, or is this something else? Is this from outer, extraterrestrial?
As much as I'd love to believe that it was extraterrestrial, Occam's razor states that the simplest and most likely explanation is usually the correct one. These were Middle East videos in one of the most crowded areas of sky when it comes to cutting-edge aerospace technology, aircraft, drones. The United States has a lot there because the US is there. China and Russia are probably there spying on them. Iran is there too. So my best estimate has got to be this is our own terrestrial tech.
Well, I mean, they are sensitive military regions, could be of interest if it wasn't human-made. I mean, but that's the question. Have you seen technology like this that it could do something like this? No propulsion?
Well, we can't tell that much just by looking at the videos themselves. Behind the scenes, there's probably more analysis that's been done by intelligence community imagery analysts, and that's probably classified. But, there are things flying out there that will not be public knowledge for 10, 15, 20 years after the event. So there's a lot of spooky stuff flying right now.
And it's a good, I think that was a pun, but I like that. But let me ask you a question. Do you think that it wasn't meant for the public to see? Was it not meant for the public to see because of the sensitive military technology? I mean, Jeremy Corbell says the footage came from intelligence archives. You tell me, is that what we're dealing with, that they were concerned that this could compromise us?
Well, I think Jeremy and George are both very careful that they follow the law in this, as are the people concerned who gave them the videos. That being said, I know a lot of people in the military who see these sorts of things and are aware of them, are very frustrated at what they see as the slow pace of UAP disclosure. And so, Jeremy and George often are a kind of conduit for getting this material out. So let's have a wider debate about it. Let's get Congress looking at it. Let's get other media outlets looking at it. And let's get a kind of brains trust of experts trying to figure out what we're looking at here.
Nick, you are brilliant, and I love having you on, but I will tell you, I still think that this could be something else. That's just my take. I could be 100% wrong. We shall see. But I appreciate the conversation, as always. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you're right.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.
Have a net worth this morning of $2.3 trillion. Elon wants to raise it by $1 trillion, but already the 10 richest Americans have $2.3 trillion of wealth. That's a lot for 10 people, 10 individuals. That's not 10 companies. That's not 10 clans. That's 10 people. But they also happen to own a lot more. They own the White House. They installed the vice president. They determine U.S. government policy. They will own the cryptocurrencies, which will become our main currencies. They own all of the big platforms on which we communicate. They own YouTube, of course, which is the channel where I'm able to say sometimes things that are not in the U.S. government's liking, but I don't know for how long. They own my email address. They own the full knowledge of every keystroke I've made in the last 10 years, no doubt. They own my privacy. They own the newspapers like the Washington Post, owned by Jeffrey Bezos. They will own TikTok shortly, TikTok USA, because Larry Ellison is buying it on behalf of Benjamin Netanyahu. And Ellison will give it to his son as a nice gift. He's already given to his son Paramount Studios, Paramount Media, and CBS News. It's quite a world. And that's just 10 or so Americans. So we're in a very strange concentration of power, I think the likes of which we've never seen before. It has already destroyed democracy. We are democratic in form only, but we don't have a sensible non-democratic system. We have a privatized system, which is quite different. In China, which is not a democracy, it is a technocracy, and the business sector is subordinate to the government, clearly, as Jack Ma found out. In the United States, it's the other way around, which is the government is subordinate to the particular corporate class now of the big tech sector. So we're in a governance adventure as well. The difference of the utopian and the dystopian vision of AI is politics. Will there be general well-being depends on how we use our surplus. If all the surplus goes to the top, then we will have mass impoverishment.
I'm going to casually mention to you something that's very scary indeed, and tell you what the alien agenda is. And it's going to sound very familiar. The alien agenda is the complete takeover of this planet, the killing off of 5, 6 to 7/8 of the world's population, by the year 2029. U.S. military has known about this for 45 years. They've told no one. As far as I know, I'm the only person standing before a crowd talking about the alien agenda, secretively. Okay. Back in 1954, I'll give you a quick overview. There was the created 1954 treaty where Eisenhower signed a pact with the known alien species of the time. There were 3 at the time. And he said that we're going to deal in high technology, but you can take a few head of cattle and a few human beings and you can experiment on them. It's unthinkable. It's stuff straight out of the Nazi death camps, and I'm kidding you not, it's plain BS, and it's got to stop. Now, the created 1954 treaty had been violated. After the great firefight, the alien-human war, I am the only living survivor talking about it worldwide at all. Only one. The other 2 are in nursing homes in Canada, and the Canadian government refuses to allow any U.S. people, including myself, to talk to them because they are afraid of kidnapping. Probably the reason I got shot to pieces and 11 attempts on my life is I am a direct threat to the entire system. The New World Order, the alien agenda is one and the same. It's world takeover and the decimation of the population of this planet. Now, I'm going to tell you something a little bit different about the alien species. The bad news ones, there are 9 races of alien populations. To look at a human being as a bag of food. They're not cannibals. They don't eat the flesh and the bones and all that kind of stuff. They use the glandular secretions of animals and human beings as a mixture of the vitamins for their food. They get high off of our adrenal gland substances called adrenochrome. It's something like cocaine to them. Now, what can we do about it? Right now, if we do nothing, we can do nothing about it, and it will continue to go on. Basically, we'll be led in the dark, and you'll keep seeing more and more people disappear. Right now, there's 100,000 children totally unaccountable through FBI archives, cannot be traced anywhere. They haven't been murdered. Nobody's ever seen them. I think they're hauled underneath in some of these bases, and they are summarily done away with, and they are literally eaten. Now, that is a scary thing indeed. And I'm not asking you to believe me in toto. I am asking you to seriously do enough homework that you can go out through the public record, through the congressional records, find out who's voting for what, and go from there. Do your own program, do your own agenda, and do your own speaking out. And if enough of us do this, there is some saving grace. However, we don't have a whole heap of time left.
When we take a close look at the New Testament.
In order to understand the Old Testament and the New Testament, you have to first understand where the book comes from, who wrote it. You have to understand it in the context of the time in which it was written. I'm going to make a statement now that many people who are in denial will not want to hear, but if you give me an opportunity, I think I can prove the point. The Bible is nothing more, Old and New Testament, nothing more than a retelling of the most ancient story the world has ever known. And that's why the Bible's called the greatest story ever told. And a cursory understanding of ancient history will show that the greatest story ever told was the story of the zodiac. Astrology. The Bible is nothing more than the greatest astronomical story ever told. It is pure astrology based on the zodiac. The fact of the matter is, if you've done your homework, you're going to find that the Bible is nothing more than astrotheology, the worship of the God's heaven.
To further understand the connection between Christianity and ancient religions, we must study astronomy. Astronomy is a very precise science that we use today in determining, for example, when we will have the next eclipse or when we will see the next full moon. As far back as we can go in history, the year was divided into 12 equal parts, just as we today divide the year into 12 months. You draw a circle representing 1 year, which is then divided into 12 equal parts, each one of which is called a zodiac or a house. The sun travels through the different houses of the zodiac. This is where the connection between the Son of God having 12 helpers, as they were called in Egypt, and the Son of God, Jesus Christ, who ministered to him, having 12 apostles. After dividing the circle into 12 equal parts, it was then further divided into 4 groups. The winter solstice, from the middle of the winter across the zodiac into the summer solstice. Then the spring, or vernal equinox, to the autumnal equinox. And there you have the cross on the zodiac. Remember, this is all ancient science, and it has been done like this for thousands of years.
Now, as I said, those who would not want to hear this are in denial. But as a teacher, I'm asking only to hear what I have to say. In the book of John, in the New Testament, John 14:2, Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many mansions." Well, like many other scriptures in the King James, that was not correctly translated. In fact, it is not "in my Father's house are many mansions," because in fact that makes very little to no sense at all. How can you have houses or mansions in a house? "In my Father's house are many mansions" is correctly translated, "In my Father's abode are many dwelling places. In my Father's heavens are many houses." Well, of course, there's at least 12 houses in the heavens that we know of. In my Father's abode, the heavens, there are many houses. That's right, at least 12 houses of the zodiac. That's what was being said here. Now we go to perhaps the oldest book in the Bible, Job. And in the book of Job, I ask you to turn to chapter 38 and read with me, if you can, where in 38, 31, 32, and 33, something very important is said concerning astrology. In chapter 38, 33, first, the scripture says, "Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven?" In other words, there are ordinances in heaven. And 31 now, going back to 38, 31, God says to Job, according to the scripture, "Can thou bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades or loose the bands of Orion?" What are we talking about here? The Pleiades, an astrological symbol in the zodiac. And God is supposedly saying to Job, "Can thou bind the sweet influences?" What influences? I thought that that's all evil. That's all astrology. That's that New Age stuff. We don't have anything to do with that. And here God is saying to his prophet Job, "Can thou bind the sweet influences of the Pleiades or loose the bands of Orion? Can thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season?" Now there's a heavy piece of information. God is saying to Job in 32, 38, 32, "Can thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season? Or can thou guide Arcturus with his sons?" We're talking astrology here. Now, if you go to the King James Version, that's the version that God spoke. And if we read from the King James Bible what the word Mazzaroth means. Here in the King James, in the interpreting dictionary, in the back of the King James, we look up the word Mazzaroth. And here we see Mazzaroth means the 12 signs of the zodiac. That's from the King James. Mazzaroth means the zodiac. And therefore God is saying to his great prophet Job, "Can thou bring forth the zodiac in his season?" That's right, because the zodiac has 12 seasons, 12 houses, and that's why God's Son, the light of the world, could say, "In my Father's abode are many houses." We're talking astrology here. But I'm going to tell you one of the most interesting things you're going to find in the Bible about astrology is the end times. There's not a Christian program on anywhere that is not concerned with the end times, the last days, the end of the world. Jehovah's Witnesses are proclaiming all over the world that this is the end times. In fact, these are the last days. We are living in the end times. But the end times of what? If you understand that the Bible is nothing more than a retelling of astrology and the astrological zodiac, then you understand why it is that Jesus is referred to have fed his people and his followers. God's Son feeds his followers according to Matthew 14:17. We read, and of course this is a very old story. We've all heard about how Jesus fed his followers with 2 fishes. And with 2 fishes and 5 loaves, he fed his people. The 2 fishes are, of course, the 2 fishes of the zodiac, which is the constellation of Pisces. Pisces is always symbolized as 2 fishes. Consequently, God's Son, that thing that comes up in the morning, feeds his people on earth in the sign of the 2 fishes. Now, if you think we're stretching this point,
what is a sleeper agent?
A sleeper agent is someone who is taken virtually from birth and trained to be of another nationality. The Russians are very good with sleeper agents. No other country that we know of uses sleeper agents. Let's say you're born in Russia. From the age of, 2, they take you from your family with your family's acquiescence, and they take you to an American-style town that they've built out in the hinterland in Russia. They teach you to speak English with an American accent. You watch American TV shows, you watch American movies, you eat American food, you get an American-style education. So I have no idea that you're not American. And then they send you to the United States with a fake ID. I was born in 1964, so they'll go through death records from 1964 and they'll look for deaths where the person was only a day or 2 old. They'll take that name and the birth date and they'll get a Social Security card with the birth date. They'll use the Social Security card to get you a passport. So you come here on your American passport, everything's legit. Now your name is Bob Smith, which was really that baby's name that died. And you get a job. You may work as a travel agent for 20 years and never hear from them, but then they'll activate you and they'll say, we want you to go take care of this target over here.
Kill him.
Yeah. Or we want you to get a job at the Defense Department and give us everything that you can steal. I interviewed a former sleeper from the East German Intelligence Service, raised as an American, sent to New York. He got a job, he got married, and he had a daughter. And he told me, as soon as I looked at her face the day she was born, I realized this life wasn't for me anymore. So they sent him an activation. What they do is listen to your radio message, a voice just saying 6, 5, 8, 12. That's called a reading from a one-time pad, a message from the KGB to a sleeper. But those numbers don't mean anything unless you have the decryption pad. He gets one of these messages and he didn't respond to it. He was on the subway one day. He's just standing there holding the strap. And this guy came up to him and the guy grabs the strap next to him and whispers in his ear, if you don't report back, I have to kill you. He ran straight to the FBI field office in New York. And he said, I'm an East German sleeper and I want to turn myself in. And he became a prolific source for the FBI. He came over here young and did this for 25 years. As soon as his daughter was born, he was like, wow, this is what life is for, not being a sleeper.
Visualize your house off the grid, clean energy, no wiring. Why? Because every device, whether it's this size device or your refrigerator, will have a small solid state quantum vacuum zero-point energy device in it, running it. So there's no electromagnetic fields running through your house because you don't need wiring. Think what that'll do to construction costs and the simplicity of it. And here we are in the Sahara Desert, and you want to grow food? You create a biosphere dome. It's run on free, clean energy, as we've demonstrated. You're growing oranges. You can grow crops. You can have different zones in it for different temperature and humidity control. So anywhere on the planet that you need to have foods, it could be done under controlled circumstances, digitally automated, but with no cost for the energy and the water, virtually none. What that means is the food scarcity and starvation we're facing, that goes away very quickly in a 20-year period. Here's your typical street in your neighborhood, anywhere in the world. And as we bring these technologies out, the grid comes down. We don't need it anymore. When there's a snowstorm or hurricane or whatever, you don't lose power because you're not dependent on a grid that's going to be torn down by ice and snow and wind. You don't need wires. And all these wires, the clutter of wires, you don't need them because every device will have its own source of energy. This could have been done decades ago.
Everything around you is a fucking lie. And I don't know how else to say it because I've been preaching it for years to everybody at home. If you are watching this and you do not have $100 million, please understand every single institution you believe in, the people who you go to for planning permission to build your fucking house, the police you call when there's a problem, the doctors you go to when you're sick, all of it is built on one big fucking illusion. It is all a scam. It's half-truths. It's an empire of lies. It's all fallacy. It's made up. It's all bullshit.
I don't understand why you have to pay to live on a planet you were born on. And then, I mean, it's such a simple question, and it's haunted me ever since. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Ask yourself that question. Why do we have to pay to live on a planet we were born on? And who are we actually paying for the privilege of being alive here? Who made them the boss? Who put them in charge? Think about that. We're looking at a war over water, when instead of feeding the military-industrial complex, we could be building desalination plants all over the world so everybody could have water, so they could grow crops. But are we doing it? Hell no. Why would we want to do that? Why would we want to empower people to grow food and take care of themselves? Then we can't control them.
You know how you go to a psychiatrist and you sit down and you tell the psychiatrist your problem, and they go into you and bring out of you things in your past that help you to deal with yourself? Do you know that we can write plays and make films that help a people that have been hurt spiritually and mentally? You can have mass psychological benefit through movies, through plays, but they are not going to support that. We have to support that. So that's why a plan like this